we consider this graph of a piecewise function. And if you are going to analyze this graph, we can observe that there is an arrow here. There are arrows that you can able to observe here. However, there is an imaginary line found here. There are cases in the graphical analysis of limits, then when we are going to observe the graph, we can able to see arrows just like this, so it goes here and others. Now this will tell you that in the graphical analysis of limits, there is what we call limits at infinity and infinite limits. So what does it mean by the limits at infinity? It means to say that a particular value x, so we're referring to the abscissa x, just keep on increasing. So when x keeps on increasing, be it positive infinity, so that is in the positive values, or it keeps on decreasing, that is in the negative values, then you are now asked to how does y behave. Okay, so you are now referring to the limit and you're referring to y here. However, if you're talking about the infinite limits, then you are now referring to the behavior of y. Okay, does the value of y keeps on increasing, or does the value of y just keep on decreasing? Now this kind of graphical analysis is quite confusing. That is why through the graphs, let us now understand the limits at infinity and infinite limits. Now how do we observe infinity? Looking into the xy plane, remember that when you keep on moving on the left, then x approaches negative infinity. When it comes to y, when you go down, this approaches negative infinity. However, when the values of x keep on increasing, then this x approaches positive infinity. And when the value of y keeps on increasing too, then y approaches positive infinity. So your basis here is when you go to the right, that is positive infinity. When you go up, the same. When you go down, because you're referring to low values, no? And when you go to the left for x, you're referring to negative infinity. So in the study of limits at infinity and infinite limits, you are now trying to understand what happens to x or what happens to y when this or any of these two keeps on increasing. Just like this. If you try to observe this one, the movement of the graph, the behavior of the graph will just tell you that x just keeps on increasing here. Okay? X just keeps on increasing dahil yung graph papunta siya sa right. Okay? Kung papansinin naman natin ito, paakyat siya, right? But when you're referring to x, there is an imaginary line here, and we call that one as the vertical asymptote, and that is x equals 4. Therefore, in this case, when x just keep on approaching 4 from the right, x keeps on approaching 4 from the right. So ito siya, no? Limitado siya dito. Ngayon, kung papansinin mo kung ano ang nangyayari sa y, the behavior of y here, kitang-kita mo that there is an asymptote. So it meaning it will not touch x that is equal to 4. Instead, the presence of the arrow tell you now that it keeps on increasing. Paakyat siya, as you observe here. So y keeps on increasing. So ibig sabihin, y approaches positive infinity signifies y keeps on increasing without bound. Okay? Now here, when you go to the blue graph here, then you see this one, meaning this is included. Typically, we are saying that when x is 2, then y is 1 in this case. Okay? However, when it comes to infinity, when x keeps on approaching 4 from the left, so tinan nyo, papunta siya sa 4, the values of x. Okay? Pero ano nangyayari sa y habang lumalapit ang x sa 4 galing sa kanyang left? Paakyat siya, right? So ibig sabihin, y just keep on increasing without bound. So that is another behavior. Okay? In here, x keeps on approaching 0 from the right. Papunta siya sa 0. Okay? Dito siya. Kaso, limitado siya. This is also an asymptote. A vertical asymptote. So ano nangyayari sa y habang ang x keeps on approaching 0 from the right? Ang y naman ay tuloy-tuloy sa pag-increase. Okay, as the arrow tells you, it goes up. Okay, so this one is unshaded. So it means to say x that is equal to 0 is not defined here. Okay, but there is -2 here. Tapos pansinin natin yung right ng -2. So when x approaches -2 from its right, you see this one, this is also a vertical asymptote, x is equal to -2. Okay, remember your equation of the line in the vertical line in your pre-calculus. Ano ang nangyayari naman sa y habang x ay nilalapitan ng -2 galing sa kanyang right? Nakikita nyo na paakyat yan. Okay? So it means to say y keeps on increasing without bound. Okay, now when we move here, okay, so this is also an illustration of the graph. Nakikita natin ang -2. Hindi niya dadaanan ng x that is equal to -2 kasi siyang vertical asymptote. So ibig sabihin, as x keeps on approaching -2 from its left, kasi papunta siya dito. Okay? So ano nangyayari sa y? The value of y, you're now referring to the behavior of y. Kasi yung presence itong arrow, wala siyang katapusan sa pag-decrease. Okay? Therefore, y keeps on decreasing without bound. So there is negative infinity. However, here, ikikita natin ang -5. When x approaches -5 from its right, huwag na kayong malito sa right and left. Right, ito. Left, ito. Okay? Kung ito yung number, ito ang right niya, then this is its left. Okay? So, ano nakikita mo nangyayari sa y? Nakikita mong arrow na paakyat siya. Tama? So, y keeps on increasing in this case. Okay? Dito sa last graph, -5. Ito ang left ni -5. So, x approaches -5 from its left. So, anong ginagawa ng y? Habang nilalapitan ng x ang -5 from its left, pababa ng pababa ang values ng y. Therefore, y keeps on decreasing without bound. Pero kapag i-compare mo siya dito, ang x dito ay tuloy-tuloy sa pag-decrease kasi papunta siya sa left. Okay? And this arrow tells you infinite movement to the left. So, anong nangyayari sa y? Kung infinite ang movement niya sa left, tapos we consider this one as a horizontal asymptote, tapos ang y equals 0 is a horizontal asymptote. Therefore, as x keeps on decreasing without bound, and that is already considered to be limits at infinity, ang nangyayari naman kay y, si y ay nilalapit-lapitan niya ang 0. Pero hindi siya magiging 0 kasi nga in the rule of limit, lalapitan niya lang ang 0. The same happens also here. X keeps on increasing in this case. Kaso, nag-exist ang isang horizontal asymptote. Therefore, limitado ang y at ang y ay nilalapit-lapitan niya lang ang 0 habang ang x dito ay patuloy sa pag-increase. Graphical analysis. The value of c here may not necessarily be part of the domain of the function. Okay? Now, let's try to go back and how do we evaluate or get the limits using the graphical analysis the previous way. Okay? Let's say for example the value of c here is 2. So I will write it 2 here. So what happens to the limit of this function? Let's say the function is f of x habang ang x ay nilalapitan ng 2 sa kanyang left. So when x keeps on approaching 2 from its left, ano ang nangyayari sa y? In the graphical analysis, this is the left of 2. And it is observed na habang pumupunta ang values ng x sa left ng 2, the value of y approaches 1. Therefore, left of 2, ang nangyayari, y approaches 1. So the limit is 1. It is also observed on the right of 2 na ang y approaches 1 also. Okay? Therefore, limit is 1. So kung 1 ito, 1 din ito, and according to the rule, limit from the left and right must be equal. Therefore, since they are equal and both exist, limit is 1. Now we will select another number. Let's say for example the number is 2. The number is 0. Okay, here, the number is 0. So let's see be 0. So ano nangyayari sa value ng y? Habang inoobserban natin kung ano, habang ang x ay nilalapit-lapitan ang 0 from its left. So nakikita natin na ang value ng y ay papunta sa It is 2, right? Therefore, as x approaches 0 from the left, y approaches 2. So the limit is 2. At ano naman ang nangyayari sa value ng y habang ang x ay nalalapit-lapitan ng 2 from its right? Nakikita natin ito, the graph here, paakyat siya. So ibig sabihin nito, the value of y just keeps on increasing. It keeps on increasing without bound. Therefore, this is positive infinity. Okay? The positive infinity is not a number. It is a representation of the behavior. So itong infinity na to ay hindi real number. Therefore, 2 versus infinity, then the limit does not exist kasi hindi na siya real number. Consider that. Okay? Let's have another number. Let's say the number is negative 3.5. The value negative 3.5. So gagawin natin dito, left of ano nangyayari sa y when x approaches negative 3.5 from the left and right. Pareho pinupuntahan ng y, di ba? It goes to 0. So the value, the limit is 0. 0. So limit of the function in two-sided is also 0. Ito yung basic, okay? Ang positive infinity na ito as the limit on the right of 0 is an indication of limits. We call that one as infinite limits. Ito na yung infinite limits na sinasabi natin. Okay? Kasi yung limit ay naging positive infinity. Remember, that is a behavior. So, ibig sabihin na ang y ay tuloy-tuloy lang sa pag-increase. Let's say for example, we have negative 2. So, ano nangyayari sa left ng negative 2 when it comes to y? What happens to y here? Pababa ng pababa ang values ng y. There is negative infinity here. Kung nilalapitan ng x ang negative 2 from the left, ang value ng y ay patuloy sa pag-decrease. Therefore, negative infinity. Pero kung titignan natin ang right ni negative 2, paakyat siya. Okay? Paakyat ang values ng y. Therefore, this is positive infinity. Negative and positive ay hindi pareho ang kanilang behavior. Therefore, the limit does not exist kapag tinutukoy mo na is the two-sided limit. Let's have another number, let's say negative 5. This is negative 5. Then we talk about left of negative 5. Left of negative 5, ano nangyayari sa y? Y keeps on decreasing. So that is negative infinity. Then when it comes to the right of y keeps on increasing. So we have here positive infinity. So this is positive infinity. Negative and positive, they do not have the same behavior. So the limit does not exist. So anong ibig sabihin kapag pareho silang negative infinity? Kapag pareho silang negative infinity, okay, ang ending negative infinity din kasi pareho sila na pinupuntahan left and right. Pero kapag positive infinity, then that is also positive infinity. Okay? Pero kung magkaiba silang dalawa, so ibig sabihin magkaiba ang pinupuntahan ng left and right, then the limit does not exist. Pag ang left ay papunta sa negative infinity ang y, at yung right ay negative infinity din, the limit in two-sided is also negative infinity. Pero kung ang left ay papunta sa, or the values of y keeps on increasing, and so with left or right ay parehong increasing ang value ng y, then the limit of the function is positive infinity. Kung magkaiba silang dalawa, kung ang left negative infinity, ang right ay negative infinity, then ang two-sided limit does not exist. Take note of that. So kung ito, positive infinity, this is negative infinity, then the limit does not exist. Okay? So what about if we are now talking to limits at infinity? Let's say for example, what is the limit of f of x as x approaches positive infinity? So kung babalikan natin ang graph dito, x keeps on increasing. Ang sabi niya dito, x keeps on increasing. So what happens to y? Dito, klaro na ang y that is equal to 0 acts as the horizontal asymptote. Therefore, the limit of f of x on the graph as x keeps on increasing is 0. Kasi ang behavior ng y ay nilalapitan niya lang ang 0 and that is the limit. Okay? So what about when x, what about if you're asked to get the limit of f of x as x approaches negative infinity? Do they have the same behavior? Ito ang x approaches negative infinity kasi ito papunta sa decreasing siya, an ending decreasing of number. Ano nangyayari sa y? Okay, ang value ng y, habang hindi siya makaakyat, no, kasi limitado siya sa y that is equal to 0, kasi isa siyang horizontal asymptote. Therefore, y that is equal to 0 serves as the limit of the function. So the answer is 0. Okay? It just happened that they have the same behavior. Pero magkaiba ang tinutukoy na positive and negative kasi yan na yung behavior ng x. Okay? Let's say for example, we create another problem. What is the limit of f of x as x approaches 4? This is two-sided limit. So ito yung 4. X that is equal to 4. Anong ginagawa ng left ng 4? Diba yung y keeps on increasing? What about right of 4? Y also keeps on increasing. So that is the time that you need to have positive infinity. Bakit? As a proof of that, when x keeps on approaching 4 from the left, and when x keeps on approaching 4 from the right, ang y ay tuloy-tuloy sa pag-akyat as observed on the graph here, and y keeps on increasing also as observed on the graph here on the right of 4. So let us have more examples. Let's say limit of f of x as x approaches negative 2 from the left. So we go to negative 2, so this is negative 2, and we observe left of negative 2. So here, now observe the behavior of y. So y here keeps on decreasing. Kasi nakikita natin dito, mula sa left na negative 2, pababa ang values ng y that is infinite. Therefore, the answer here is negative infinity. What about on the right of negative 2? So in right of negative 2, we observe the right of negative 2, y here keeps on increasing. Kita natin na paakyat ang values ng y habang nilalapitan ng x ang negative 2 galing sa kanyang right. Therefore, here, the answer is positive infinity. Just take note that we don't exactly mean equal. We are just referring to the behavior of y. Okay? That is the infinity. So if this is negative infinity, the other is positive infinity. So the limit of f of x as x approaches negative 2 does not exist. Okay? Kasi hindi pareho negative infinity and positive infinity. So here, we proceed to limit of f of x as x approaches 4. Then we go to 4 here and observe the behavior of 4 or the behavior of y from the left of 4. So this one is the left of 4. Y goes up infinitely, so that is positive infinity. From the right of 4, y also goes up infinitely, which is also positive infinity. Therefore, since left of 4, since when x approaches left of 4 and when x approaches 4 from its right, then both emphasizes that the behavior of y keeps on increasing. Kasi nakikita natin ang graph dito, no? It keeps on increasing, so that is positive infinity. Therefore, limit of f of x as x approaches 4 in reference to left and right, which make y keeps on increasing without bound. So this is also positive infinity. Okay? So let's move to limit of f of x as x approaches negative 5. So this is negative 5. Pero pag nakikita natin ang right ng negative 5, ang nangyayari sa value ng y ay paakyat infinitely. Pero kapag nasa left tayo ng negative 5, y decreases infinitely. Therefore, the limit of f of x as x approaches negative 5, left and right of 5, magkaiba ang kanilang tinutukoy because left of negative 5, ang y keeps on decreasing. Sa right of 5 naman, of negative 5, ang y keeps on increasing. Okay, here. Therefore, the limit of f of x as x approaches negative 5 does not exist. Now, this is to inform you that when you are evaluating functions or evaluating limits of these functions, you will always consider positive infinity, negative infinity as your answer. Please take note that infinity is not a real number, no? So we're just referring to the behavior. Please also understand that when we refer to infinity, then this, again, not a real number, and so we are just emphasizing or writing infinity to make it clear on how the value of y behaves. Also, do not forget that whenever you encounter an arrow as you are approaching particular value of x from either sides, left or right, then arrow would signify infinity. Okay? And always consider, and always be very observant on the imaginary lines. The vertical lines are asymptotes.